Well, how are you, Slater Crusaders? America's the greatest country in the world, no doubt about that. California sucks, but America's the greatest country in the world. The recall effort went down in flames yesterday. Here is our still governor of California.
We said yes to science. We said yes to vaccines. We said yes to ending this pandemic. We said yes to people's right to vote without fear of fake fraud or voter suppression. We said yes to women's fundamental constitutional right to decide for herself what she does with her body, her fate and future. We said yes to diversity. We said yes to inclusion.
We'll get to the fraud in a second, but who likes that guy? You know what I mean? He's such a slimeball. He's just a quintessential slimeball used salesman politician. I don't get it. How could anyone fall for that? The fact that I live in a state, I happen to live in this state, where there are so many, I'm surrounded by so many people who are either shockingly ignorant to everything around them or have a worldview that is so antithetical to yours and mine. It is incredibly discouraging, to say the least. California is hopeless. It's hopeless. California is hopeless. It's gone. No better case will ever be made against a governor. It's impossible. He shut down the churches. What are we talking about? He shut down the churches. He shut down schools. While his kids went to school in person still. He shut down businesses. He talks about yes on science. He's not proposing. We in this state in California, you have to mask your two-year-old when they're outside. And still, a vast majority of people in this state said, yeah, that's great. This is fine. I like all this. This is wonderful. I'd like to keep it just like this. Like, that's as hopeless of a situation as you'll ever have. Are you with me? Like, if he tried to get recalled, I don't know what more he could have done. And still, almost 70% of the state is like, yeah, this is great. Let's keep it going. Listen, I know, especially once I do my radio show to people in California exclusively, they'll be looking for hope. Right? You know, when you're discouraged, kind of lick your wounds a little bit, and then you go to someone and you look for some hope, and that's usually me. My glass isn't half full, it's overflowing, right? That's Mike Slater. Nope, that ship has sailed, folks. That ship is long gone. I moved to California 10 years ago from Tennessee. They warned me, by the way. They said, don't go. I said, no, it'll be great. When I moved to San Diego, this county, which is bigger in population and size than half of the states in the country, San Diego County is, the county's government was entirely Republican. 5 Republican board of supervisors. The city council was a majority Republican, even in crazy California. The mayor was Republican. That was San Diego 10 years ago. A little bastion of conservatism in this crazy state because it was a military town. Yesterday, the county of San Diego voted to be a champion of reproductive freedom. That's what the county board voted on yesterday. A champion of killing babies. Like that, a champion of abortion. What a bizarre language even. A champion of? What are we talking about? This is where we live. This is California. This is California. After being inflicted with so much pain these last 2 years in California that other states weren't, the people of California said that this is great. Thank you, may I have another? Thank you, Mr. Newsom, may I have another? It's just astounding to me. Now, on that fraud point, how did he put it? Like, oh, this was a vote, yes, against accusations of fraud. I went to go vote yesterday in person. Someone voted for me already. I went to go vote in person down the street at the elementary school. I walked in, said, hey, I'm Mike Slater. Clicked it in. Oh, you already voted. Someone else was nice enough to vote for me for the recall. So I had to fill out a provisional ballot, and somehow the county or whoever is going to determine what Mike Slater's vote, who he really voted for. Was it this first ballot or was this the second ballot? So it's very exciting about how Mike Slater is going to vote. And I'll never know. I'll never really know. But I'm sure I was the only one. I'm sure I'm the only one well, it happened twice. And that guy said it's already happened twice in that one little precinct. But I'm sure we're the only two that happened across the entire state. $2 billion of COVID unemployment money in California went to prisoners. $2 billion went to prisoners. Millions of it went to prisoners in different states. Like, what? How is that? How is that possible? $2 billion went to prisoners. In California, and this is why I'm discouraged for you too, whatever blue state you happen to live in. It's not just woe is me. This affects the country. Californians had a chance yesterday to send a shot across the bow to the blue governors in every state across the country. If Gavin Newsom was recalled, it would have stopped everything. It would have stopped everything. Every blue Democrat and every Democrat in every blue state, governor and Congress, right? They would have stopped every COVID mandate like that. Just gone. They're gone. All of it would be gone because the momentum would have been stopped immediately. All of it would have stopped tomorrow. The vaccine mandates would have ended from DC before they even got implemented. The vaccine passport, all of it would have stopped because COVID would have been seen as a political loser. Right now, COVID is a political winner for a lot of people. It's a winner for a lot of businesses. It's a winner for a ton of politicians. Newsom loves COVID. He's never had so much praise. He's never had so much adulation. He's never had so much power. He's never had so much attention. Newsom loves COVID. So do so many governors across the country. They love the power. So they're not going to get rid of it. Could have ended. We could have put a stop to it here in California. And it would have put a stop to it across the country because COVID would have been a political loser. But instead, with such an overwhelming win from Newsom, the Democrats are going to interpret this as COVID being continuing, maybe even more of a political winner than they thought. Newsom's so angry at all this, he's going to punish the people of California more than, through your children, by the way. How dare you bother him and inconvenience him by having to run an extra campaign and raise money for this? So he's going to punish the people of California through their children, masks and vaccines. And it was such a win that the blue governors across the country are emboldened. COVID's not a political loser, it's a political winner now, more than they ever even dreamed it was. And the Democrats are going to push even harder with all this stuff. What a shame. Let's take a minute here, because this is just kind of fascinating, about a quick little history lesson of California. There's a reason that Dream is only connected with one state, right? There's no offense, but there's no Oklahoma Dream or something, right? The first Americans who settled here, there were some Mexicans here, not many, but there were some. And the Mexicans called these explorers, these first explorers and settlers in California, they called them osos. Look at these osos. That's Spanish for bears. And I reckon it's because they probably didn't shave forever on their exploration here. So they looked like bears. William B. Ide was the leader of what was known as the Bear Flag Revolt. And that's when that's William B. Ide right there, looking like a bear. And that's when he and his guys made this flag. That's the flag or the beginning of the flag of California. We still have a bear on it today. It's an oso on it. And William B. Ide issued a proclamation. It was in 1846. And this is the beginning of California. He said, "We invite all peaceable and good citizens to assist us in establishing and perpetuating a Republican government which shall secure to all civil and religious liberty." Now, let me just be clear. This is essentially California's Declaration of Independence. This is California's Declaration of Independence. 1846, Bear Flag Revolt. Come on, everyone. If you're game for this, come join us in the fight. Okay, so what does this government do? This government shall secure religious liberty. Has Gavin Newsom secured religious liberty? No, he shut down churches. LA County threatened to shut off the water and electricity at Grace Community Church, at John MacArthur's church in LA. They ended up losing their court battle, actually, and it ended up paying Grace Community Church $400,000 in fines and legal fees. But the point is, has the governor secured religious liberty in California? That's one of our founding principles in California. Has the governor done that? Of course not. He's done things that no one's ever done, ever. He shut down churches for 2 years. Okay, what else? The state shall detect and punish crime. What a joke. Do we even need to go over that? Detecting and punish crime in California? We're passing laws that make committing crimes legal. We're making things legal. Let me tell you this one. This is my favorite one. The mayor of San Diego, right? The mayor of San Diego, when he was state rep, just before he became mayor, I don't know if it was his first bill, but it was one of his most prominent bills. He made it legal to knowingly and willingly transmit AIDS to people. Okay? Like usually when people talk about legalizing crime in California, like you end up talking about like Walgreens and theft and robbery and stuff like, oh, you can go in and you can just steal a bunch, you can steal up to $950 worth of stuff and you just get a misdemeanor or slap on the wrist, no big deal, right? Yeah, that's a big deal, it's a problem. Our mayor in San Diego made it legal in California to knowingly and willingly transmit AIDS. And the claim was that law was homophobic. What? Okay, anyway. So yeah, we're detecting and punishing crime, sure. The state shall encourage industry, virtue, and literature. Well, it's education, right? Our schools are always in the bottom of the entire country. And finally, the state shall leave unshackled by fetters. It's like the ball and chain. Agriculture, or commerce, agriculture, and mechanism. So is the governor of California leaving unshackled business, farmers, and manufacturing in California? No, there's no place in the country where they have more chains than here in California. Back to education, Larry Elder comes in, calls for school choice, which, by the way, a majority of minorities support. He comes in and calls for school choice, and he gets called an Uncle Tom and the black face of white supremacy and the model minority slave to the white man, and that was all by the LA Times. There'll never be a better chance to have school choice in California and to stick it to the unions and have school choice, and it's not going to happen. The people of California said, no, we're fine with the failing schools we have today, thank you. And by the way, let's have in ethnic studies, let's not have grades anymore, let's teach little Johnny that he's gay in kindergarten, let's talk about transgenderism to kindergartners, let's just keep going down this ridiculous road that we're on. It's great. It's so bizarre. Anyway, one last thing he said, William B. Ide in 1846. He said he further declares, if the man, like whoever comes and visits, or whoever comes and fights for us, for the Bear Flag Revolt, further declares that he relies upon the favor of heaven by the love of truth and the hatred of tyranny for the hope of success, and that its citizens are the guardians, its officers are the servants, and its glory, and their glory is their sweet reward. And yesterday, the people of California had an opportunity to achieve the glory of their reward. All right, a day that the Osos could hoist a new bear flag into the sky and rebuke those racist Democrats, by the way, who for some reason don't want a black man to be governor. Ugh. Instead, they want their rich trust fund white man to deny a job of a black man. I've never seen anything so unwoke and racist as that. So we had the opportunity to stop the Klan members that are in Sacramento and recall Gavin Newsom and mark September 14th, 2021 as the new Bear Flag Revolt, and instead we got crushed. Did I mention someone voted for me? Did I tell you that? It's exciting. It's a great system we have here in California. You don't have to show ID, of course. You don't have to show ID. That's absurd. So you go, and I said, hey, I'm Mike Slayer. I'd like to vote. And they said, you already voted. Super. So I filled out a provisional ballot, like I said, but I forgot to say this earlier. When you fill out a provisional ballot, you put your name, you put your address, and you know what else they ask you for in the provisional ballot? Gosh, golly gee willikers, wouldn't you know it? They ask for your driver's license number. Crazy. It's right there, driver's license number. There's a whole, so you got to put your driver's license, for a provisional badge, you got to put your driver's license number there. So, they can tell who you are. They also do a little Mike Slater trivia. They even ask you what city and state you were born in. Wow, it's almost like a poll test or something. It's crazy. If only, and this is a wild idea, if only they did that in the beginning, then it wouldn't be necessary. Because no one would have been able to vote for me in the first place. But again, I'm sure I'm the only one. All right, let's wrap it up here. Gavin Newsom, I can assure you, will punish the people of California. Not for 1 second will Gavin Newsom take the day off today. All right, here's the vision. Go. Gavin Newsom, he says, you know what, everybody? It's been a long campaign. It's been a long 2 years. I just need a day off. I want to take a day off. And they say, boss, no problem. You deserve it. And Gavin Newsom goes and travels back to his Napa Valley winery. Right? And he decides just to take a walk through the vineyards. And he's brushing his hands up against the leaves, and grabbing some of that dirt that the grapes are growing in. Just gets his hands dirty with nature. Right? Gavin Newsom takes that time to contemplate. He looks off into the sunset and just really thinks deeply and profoundly, and has a sort of come to Jesus moment, or it's not religious, so maybe like a come to George Washington moment, right? And he thinks, George, maybe I've gone too far. Maybe I need to back it off just a bit and make a couple changes in how I govern, how I lead. Clearly, there's a segment of the population of California that's not very happy. So maybe they make some good points, and this could be a real turning point for me in the state, and for me to be a better man. Yeah, that's not happening. There's no way that happened. He's emboldened. He's angry. He's going to hurt you. He's going to hurt the people of California. And so are all the other Democrats across the country. They're going to hurt you through your kids. New York City, Carol Markowitz in the New York Post, wrote an article about her kids' elementary and middle school experience. No lockers, no water fountains, no group projects, no field trips, no parties. Outdoor recess is masked and distanced, so there's no sports, no tag. The city even suggests to schools that they ban all sports, band, and choir because there's too much breathing, too much exhalation. Dangerous. Lunch has to be eaten outside, sitting on the ground, no talking. Not allowed to talk. I love this line from Carol. She says, kids are resilient, insist the world's least resilient adults. Sure, kids may be fine after years of being treated like disease vectors. Maybe they'll someday be okay. Or maybe they'll be severely damaged, leaving them utterly stunted and incapable of fulfilling their natures as social animals. We'll see. All right, I'll end on this quote because this is one of my favorites. And this one gave me hope throughout the recall, but there's no hope left. The LA County Sheriff, who's a Democrat, but he's conservative. LA County Sheriff, he said, nothing will change your political viewpoint more than a transient taking a dump in your front yard. Nothing will change your political viewpoint more than a transient taking a blank in your dump yard. Never a truer statement had been uttered. But even that wasn't enough. A vast majority of Californians live in this state. It's a sinking ship. And they said, yeah, this is fine. Amazing. All right, we'll change topics coming up next. I'm a bit discouraged. Listen, sometimes you got to get away, but you can't get away. So what do? You read a good book. Just read a good book. New from the New York #1 Times best-selling author Vince Flynn, Enemy at the Gates, Mitch Rapp thriller. It's about a CIA counterterrorism agent, Mitch Rapp. It's the 13th of Flynn's thrillers with Mitch Rapp, and they're all New York Times bestsellers. This book's about when the lines between the government and the elite are blurred. Who can America trust? Sound familiar? Listen, it's good to get away from the news, right, when you're discouraged. But to get away and dive into a story, but still be able to grab from that some insight as to where we are in a country and what we can do in real life. That's pretty good, right? Great stories are great because of how close they connect to reality. And this is obviously what Vince Flynn is all about, right? The characters, their motivations. It's the same thing today. You want to know about the deep state? It's all there. Enemy at the Gates, Vince Flynn. It's available now wherever books are sold. True story. I'm excited. Spread the word. Hey, Study Crusaders. I've been informed by all of our producers that that last segment was a little depressing. Seems like I'm a little down on California. Is that the takeaway you wanted us to get, Slater? Yeah. I apologize. Can we upbeat it a little bit? Can I give a little hope? I'm trying here. All right. Give me a minute to lick my wounds as a Californian. All right. Let's do some hope. First of all, God. That's first and only hope. Entire empires come and go and don't even make a footnote in history. The Bible says, behold, the nations are like a drop of a bucket and are counted as the small dust of the balance. It's like a little piece of dust. Doesn't even Gavin Newsom is dust in the grand scheme of things. God transcends all this. So that's hope number one. Honestly, I can way easier give you eternal hope about your life in heaven for eternity than I can hope in California politics and the future of the Republican Party. Like, that's hopeless. Your eternal salvation hope? That's a piece of cake. All right, that's the first thing. Also, California is not America, all right? Everyone else who's not in California, you can still push back. As Jesse Kelly said yesterday, he called for all good Californians to move to a red state. He said, don't feel bad. Tactical retreat is not surrender. It's how you win wars. I want to share this James Lindsay quote. He says, I see a lot of this America's on the brink stuff. And I'm kind of like, man, it depends on what everyday Americans do. America was founded on the principle of saying no to arbitrary and top-down power. And that is deeper in our bones than we yet realize. Yeah, there's a lot of bad and crooked stuff happening now, but everywhere I turn, I find people finding solutions. People are getting back to basics, learning about what's going on, finding ways to help each other, and pushing the evil out of our lives. Not in California, but perhaps everywhere else, there's still hope. And on that last point, pushing the evil out of our lives, if the chaos and evilness around you gets to a certain unmistakable and unbearable point, and it causes you to push it out of your heart and out of your soul and out of your home, then that is a fine way to respond to all this madness, right? Where the difference is so drastic and so obvious that you can push it out of your life, that's a good thing. Now, we can also take comfort, and this is the theme of the remaining segment here before we get to our wonderful guests. We can also take comfort that history repeats itself. Now, the things that repeat in history are horrific and mainly genocide and war. So the comfort's not in that, but the comfort is at least we know what is coming eventually. History repeats itself, always. I'll give you an example. There's a school in Ontario, in Canada, and as an act of reconciliation to the Indigenous peoples, this school had a flame purification ceremony, is all. That's all it was. It was a flame purification ceremony. And 30 books were burned. That's all. Just a good old-fashioned book burning. But it was for educational purposes, they say, and the ashes were used to fertilize a tree, which is just beautifully pagan. We bury the ashes of racism, discrimination, and stereotypes in the hope that we will grow up in an inclusive country where we can all live in prosperity and security, they say. 4,700 books were removed from the shelves at 30 schools across the district. They've been removed one way or the other, many of them burned. It was called a Give Back to the Earth program, or Give Back to the Earth ceremony. So pagan. So the Prime Minister of Canada was asked about this. we said, what do you think about book burning? Now, you would think this is something we could all kind of get behind. And he said, well, it's not up to non-Indigenous people like him to tell Indigenous people how they should feel or act to advance reconciliation. Wonderfully postmodern. There's no such thing as right or wrong, to the point where you can't even say if book burning is good or bad. Germany started burning books in 1933. It was a very official ceremony. It was a big ritual, right? They had drums and fires and speeches were made. And it was 5 years later when they started burning down synagogues. Things move faster now, but we know the process. It's all been done before. There's nothing new under the sun. We call it different names, of course, right? So can we burn books if we call it reconciliation? I love that, reconciliation. Can we expose ourselves to women and girls if we call it inclusion? Speaking of that spa in Los Angeles where the transgender dude, the guy went to the spa, but it's inclusion, right? So it's okay. Can you punch people if you call it anti-racism? And can you censor people if you call it misinformation? Well, sure, it's just the same thing over and over again. I'll just throw on top of that real quick here in California, ethnic studies curriculum, which we could have put the kibosh on, but we didn't. It includes in there a nice chanting to the Aztec gods, because the white man came and committed theocide, the killing of the Aztec native religion. So we need to reintroduce this again, this Aztec god worship as a part of kids' ethnic studies curriculum. So it's great. So we got some book burning and ritual obedience to ancient gods of human sacrifice. And that you can do that, or you're a white supremacist. That's where we are right now. But it all comes back around again. There's nothing new under the sun. Notice it, know it, see it. Get other people to see it, please. Because most people are still ignorant. And that's the question. I don't know. What percentage of this is ignorance and what percentage of this is a completely different worldview? I don't know. Like I'm inclined to think we have different, well, I don't know. Let's, real quick, a policy. One party says the policy should be we mask 2-year-olds forever, even when they're outside, wherever they go. That's one policy position. The other policy position is we don't do that. Right? So we can't seem to come to that's a tough one. That's a policy. Then we got principle differences. Capitalism versus socialism. Federalism versus national government. States' rights. I mean, these are principles. What's the best way to organize and structure a government and economic system? Okay, we got a big chasm there. Then we got worldview issues. Does truth exist? One of these days, I got to play this video. This guy, he goes to a college campus, and he asks these college kids, and these college students cannot admit that this guy is not a 6'5" Chinese 7-year-old girl. They can't get themselves to say that he's not a 6'5" Chinese 7-year-old girl because there's no such thing as truth. And they've been so ingrained with this toxic lie that like you can't say anything and you got to be nice and don't be offensive and who are you to say, right? It's unbelievable. That's surreal. This 30-year-old guy comes up and says, I'm a 6'5" Chinese 7-year-old girl. And these college kids are like, oh, okay. They're like, oh, ni hao, little girl, ni hao. And no one has I say balls, but it's like no one has even like the moral courage to say, nah, you're a 30-year-old guy. Your name's Jerry. How do we bridge these gaps? We got policy gaps, we got principle gaps, we got worldview gaps. And my last refuge of hope is always to resort back to the family, because it's your family. And how you raise your kids and help raise your grandkids, that's your ministry. That's your ministry field. That's your power to change worldview. You can't control what the crazy people out there think, but you can control your family. So I beg of you, actively raise your children. Don't let them do it for you. Coming up, we'll talk about the vaccine mandates, legality of it, politics of it. Next. True story. Spread the word. Hey, Senator Crusaders, one of the problems in our country is we don't have federalism anymore. We have not a federal government, but a national government who views the states not as independent sovereign states, but as 50 different bureaucratic jurisdictions that just implement whatever the national government dictates. It's a problem. It's been that way for a long time. It's only getting worse. And masks is just one example. So in California, every two-year-old has to wear a mask wherever they go outside in school. It's insane. You may live in a state that doesn't have such a crazy mask mandate or crazy people, but you may not be safe for long, especially with the recall yesterday and Democrats being emboldened. This may go nationwide even harder. And is that even possible? Jennifer Stefano's here. She's a fellow at the Independent Women's Forum and VP of the Commonwealth Foundation. Jennifer, how are you today?
I am quite well. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
This is one of those amazing things and added to the list of so many other things that eventually everyone will come around to. It's just how much damage will be done in the meantime. But we even had the Oxford epidemiologist, among many others, say these mask mandates don't do anything. Eventually people will get this. But what's taking everyone so long?
Well, I think you made a great point in your opening, which is largely we've lost sight of the proper role of government, why we have a government, and what the federal government is supposed to do versus what the state government is supposed to do, and where, I guess, Article 10 of the Bill of Rights, where the federal government ends and the state's rights begin. And I think the first thing we should always be doing as Americans is say local control, where it's wise, where it's prudent, where it's law, right, where it's written into the Constitution. And I think with masks and mandates, you really need to let the communities decide on this. Not only has the Oxford epidemiologist come out against it in the Wall Street Journal, the head of Tufts Pediatric Infectious Diseases came out against children wearing masks, but then there's arguments on the other side as well. You really need to let parents be in charge of their children, not the government. That's to me the most frightening thing, how much the government wants to tell us what to do with our children.
Yes, and then the parents go along with it. They just blindly say, yes, it's great, whatever you say. I'm so discouraged by that. What do you say to the argument that the health writer at the New York Times made the other day that how'd she put it, your rights, your freedoms end when you spread an infectious disease that could kill me begins?
So I think, look, intellectually, we all have to agree that there are always, in the flu is always ever present. Prior to COVID, the whooping cough in certain areas had a resurgence. Why? Because people were refusing to get vaccinated. This was not the right-wing conservatives alone. There was an article in The Atlantic in 2014 about the counties around LA, Los Angeles, which are, I don't know that you could get bluer or more radically left than that, refused to vaccinate their children. They had lower vaccine rates than Sudan. So I really don't want to hear now all of a sudden this moral posturing from the left that they're all of a sudden forcing people or going to insist on vaccines when the whooping cough was dangerous. When I was having babies, my children were at risk from all the people that wouldn't get vaccines. But I think we did a better job. There certainly was a different approach in the medical community about addressing vaccine hesitancy, and one that respected the autonomy of individuals, and one that recognized you really are not going to win people over by screaming at them, calling them stupid, or accusing them of trying to kill other people. It just doesn't work, as we're seeing. So I think this is just reckless posturing to appease the left-wing crowd and doesn't actually advance health or wellness.
Really good point about the vaccines beforehand. You're right. It's like a far right thing to be against anti-vaccines, and a far left, like hippie, crunchy, all natural, like Whole Foods kind of crowd didn't do the vaccines either prior to COVID. It's a really good point. Let's talk about your personal autonomy when it comes to the vaccines, because that's the next mandate, and it's going to be very soon. It's going to be 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds are going to be mandated. And Fauci's laying the groundwork for all this, saying, oh, well, we already have vaccines for other things in order to go to school. So there's precedent. It's no big deal. Just add it to the list. What's your argument against that?
Yeah, it depends what we're going to say by mandate. So the federal government is in charge of federal buildings and federal institutions. And if they want to say in order to enter this building, you have to have vaccines, that's fine. The states run the schools. The federal government does not run the schools. So they really can advise, but they cannot come in and mandate. So the state government, and this should be where the concurrence of the executive branch and the legislative branch make decisions at the state level. And this is, we're seeing in states like Pennsylvania, where Governor Wolf, the Pennsylvania governor, came in and just unilaterally made a mask mandate for the whole state without any concurrence or vote by the legislature. So, Mike, here it is again. It's a misunderstanding of government. I don't want nameless, faceless bureaucrats in some one-off agency making laws for me and my family. But where I do agree is that I elected people. And if the legislature votes and the governor votes and says in schools, any state building or institution, you must be vaccinated to enter, that's perfectly acceptable. That's the appropriate use of government. That's the appropriate way to go about it. And I am a vaccinated person. I vaccinated my children for COVID and everything else. But I certainly respect those that don't want it and can understand where they would be concerned at the way the left is going about it. They have absolutely no respect for checks and balances and how government works.
On such a principled stance you just made right there. Well, and even someone on the left, and honestly, if someone on the left wanted to convince the unvaccinated to get vaccinated, that's the stance they would take. That's the honest, decent, appropriate stance to take, as opposed to the haranguing and whatever else is going on right now. Jennifer Stefano, Independent Women's Forum and the Commonwealth Foundation. Jennifer, great to talk to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on.
Have a great day. We've got a great new book coming out called Debunking the 1619 Project. It's fantastic. We'll talk with the author next. Spread the word. Hey, Cider Crusaders, one of the most insidious things in our country is the 1619 Project and what the progressive left has done with this and how they've infiltrated grade school and your kids' minds and souls. And they're tearing down the story of America and who we are, and they're doing it on purpose. I'm super grateful that so many conservatives have stepped up and fought against this, and now more people are aware of it, and that's wonderful. They wish that wasn't the case. Debunking the 1619 Project. Exposing the Plan to Divide America by Dr. Mary Grabar. Dr. Grabar, how are you today? Grateful you're here, ma'am. Let's start here. What is the ideological root of this from the leaders? I mean, we have the followers of it who, whatever, they think it's nice and an interesting new history take, and we're just teaching our full history and blah, blah, blah. What are the people who are really pushing this, trying to do?
Well, I think it comes from the Black Power movement. It's been revived from the 1960s. The creator of this project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, has repeatedly talked about how she was influenced by Lerone Bennett, who was this polemical writer for Ebony magazine in the 1960s. And he actually is the one who came up with the phrase Black Power, which was then used by Stokely Carmichael and all kinds of other radicals in the second half of the 1960s, and which really turned the civil rights movement into a violent movement. So this is where it comes from. It doesn't come from history, any kind of legitimate history. It comes from resentment and a far left kind of neo-Marxist movement that also incorporates Black Power.
Let me ask you, why does that matter? Because if I were to tell that to someone who's not as paying attention much, they would think that's either conspiratorial or whatever, and they'd brush it off, and they wouldn't understand who cares? Who cares where it came from? We're teaching our history here.
But it's not history. It's history that has been grossly distorted with huge gaps in it. One part, it's about slavery and oppression of Blacks in America, but it leaves out so many facets that were exposed and written about by legitimate Black historians like John Hope Franklin and Carter Woodson. But this is not Black history. This is Marxist history, and it leaves out certain things like the fact that slavery was being practiced across the globe since time immemorial. It leaves out how the first Africans came here. Who kidnapped them? Well, if you read the 1619 Project, you would think the Europeans just went into Africa and, attacked villages and just snatched up these people who were living, nice, peaceful lives. And that's not the case at all. I mean, slavery was going on in Africa centuries before the Europeans came, as it was across the globe. And so in order to promote this narrative of white oppression against Blacks, that huge, huge chunk of history is just left out.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Dr. Grabar, what is history? How can you say that there is one historical narrative? All we're doing, Doctor, is coming in and adding some new resources, new perspectives. We have the white man's perspective, the perspective that we've been taught for so long. But how about we have some different authors, different viewpoints that can give different perspectives to the truth?
Well, you can have different perspectives, but you can't have different facts. And if you leave out certain facts about history, you are distorting history. It's not accurate history. Certainly, a view of slavery from the perspective of a plantation owner would be different from the person who was enslaved. And I would add that some of those plantation owners were Black and they became quite wealthy from exploiting their slaves. So it's not perspective. If you want perspective, maybe you should read literature, fiction, psychology, but it's not history.
Is there a problem that we've had so long of teaching kids they call it like a whitewashed history, right? Like maybe they would argue we haven't taught about the Trail of Tears, and we haven't taught about what was it that made a big deal of last year? It was the anniversary of the Tulsa riots, right? So you, Doctor, you're the one who's been leaving out our true history about America, and it's not a good one.
No, that's not true. I would encourage those critics to go back and read John Hope Franklin, Benjamin Quarles, read all the great Black historians going back 100 years, which I've used as research for my book. And you will, Frederick Douglass, who railed against the African chiefs who enslaved other Africans. I think he called them savage African chiefs. This is all well established. What's being done now is that history, going back to Frederick Douglass, is being quashed and suppressed. So I say, let's bring that back. Let's reveal it. Let's not have these lessons based on the 1619 Project that's ignore that or deny that history that's been known for hundreds of years.
I'm going to give you a difficult task, but I think it's important, and no one can do it better than you. And I've pushed you hard here, Doctor. I appreciate it. We got about 90 seconds. How would you, in 30 seconds or so, describe the story arc of America, right? Obviously, super 30,000 feet, versus the story arc of America from the 1619 Project. I'm just trying to think of I'm doing a parallel universe analysis. So you have a kid, third grade, and they live in parallel universes. One, they're told what you're going to say the story arc of America is, and then the other parallel universe, they're told the 1619 Project, and they go down that life for the rest of their childhood and who they are different at the end. But what are the two stories that could be told?
Well, the 1619 Project presents slavery as basically an invention in America, that this country was founded in order to enslave people and for a group of elite white people to enrich themselves, and those riches trickle down to all other white people. And we still live with the remnants of slavery to this day because we have inequities. And so that is the story. It's the story of oppression. What I would say is that let's look at it multiculturally. Let's look at it in a global perspective. What was going on in 1776 across the globe? There was slavery everywhere, not explicitly in Western Europe, but in the colonies, and not in Antarctica because no one was there. But if you go among the Native American tribes, you go up to Alaska, you go everywhere there was slavery in Russia and so forth. We, however, broke a new path towards freedom. And those words in the Declaration of Independence were an inspiration for slaves who sued for their own freedom, for abolitionists, and for people around the globe. So we really are, instead of being a slaveocracy, which is what the 1619 Project calls this country, we were a beacon of freedom.
They're totally different stories. And my kids will be learning the true one. Debunking the 1619 Project, exposing the plan to divide America. Please go buy it. We need to be armed with the truth. Thank you, Doctor, for writing this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Debunking the 1619 Project. Tomorrow we'll have our a vaccine mandate special. Spread the word.